Hi, you're listening to Yellow Glitter, a podcast on mindfulness through the eyes and soul of a gay Asian. I'm your host, Stephen Wakabayashi, and you're listening to a very special episode for this month of February on love, queer Asian love. I'm joined on this episode with Johnathan Gibbs, aka blasianFMA. Hi.
Hi, it's me. Yay. Hi.
Johnathan Gibbs, he, him, his, also known as blasianFMA Online, is a content creator, podcaster, activist, serial panelist, and bubble tea enthusiast. His work in activism began with his YouTube channel, blasianFMA, in 2008, in which he worked to bring awareness to the multiracial issues surrounding the intersection of Black and Asian identity. He later enjoyed a 60-episode run of his first podcast, Edugaytion, which covered QPOC issues from the point of view from people all around the United States. He is now working on a newly launched podcast, This QPOC Life, which is a spiritual successor to the Edugaytion series, reimagined and ever-evolving to be more sensitive to all marginalized communities. Wow. That was a long intro.
What a readout. Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Did your research.
Yeah, come on, research. So I have to ask you first, what inspired your name, blasianFMA?
That's a really good question, and I get it all the time. It's really funny because when I think about it, it's literally this. I was so the FMA stands for Phi Mu Alpha. It doesn't stand for Full Metal Alchemist. I've never seen that anime.
That's what I thought.
A lot of people thought that. They think that, and it's like, no, it's not that. But so the fraternity that I'm in, which is Phi Mu Alpha, it's a music fraternity. And one of the events that all the chapters across the U.S. do is called the Mills Music Mission. Mills is our founder back in 1898 in Harvard. And anyway, because it's named after him, it's like the big thing that all the fraternities do. And we go around and sing for like old people in nursing homes or like kids in hospitals. So we do a lot of singing. So I, being the tech guru of the group, would bring my little power shot with me, and I just realized I still have that camera. I'm looking at it right now on my thing. I would record the Mills Music Missions, and so I needed somewhere to share the videos. And this was before, it was before I knew Google Drive, but it was when YouTube was still a thing, or it was just becoming a thing, right? And so I stored all of the videos on YouTube, and I needed to create a channel name, and I was just like, well, I'm Blasian and I'm in Phi Mu Alpha, so blasianFMA.
Did you ever think about changing it when you weren't in Phi Mu Alpha?
Well, really, it was the reason I created a YouTube, and it really wasn't going to be for anything else until I somehow, I guess because I was watching the videos or something, then I started seeing, I don't know if there were recommended videos or related videos back then, but YouTube was a really small and niche thing back then. So somehow I found out about the very first round of content creators, people who would talk to the camera. This was a foreign concept back in the early 2000s. Or in 2008, I should say. It was still a foreign concept in the early days of YouTube. So I discovered vloggers, and then I was like, I like this one and this one and this one. And then eventually I was like, I should do it. And so I started doing it. But the origins of the channel were to house fraternity recordings.
So interesting. Throwback to YouTube back in the day when there was actually a lot of cat videos.
Oh gosh, cat videos. And just like before things went viral, and before before everything became so corporatized, and before everybody could do it because phones didn't have HD cameras on them yet, and a DSLR was out of the range of everybody, and we all had to use like our laptop cameras or Canon PowerShot with video features.
Yeah, walk around everywhere with a Canon, you know? You have your Canon and maybe a flip phone and
Oh God, I never saw anybody use the flip phone for content. That would be just a little much. But but no, it was quite a time, and we've grown up since then, and now it's a whole new wave of content creators. And you know, some of the people that I started out with have grown to become celebrities, or at least online celebrities. It's so funny how people can have millions and millions of followers and people still not know who they are unless you're in that bubble, right? Uh, but then others have retired and they keep to their own opinions on their various other social media that are available: Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all of the big ones.
Yeah, yeah. And so since we first linked up where you had me go on your podcast to talk about Queer Eye, I had an opportunity to kind of look at all the stuff you do. You know, I mentioned like YouTube, but also some of your film stuff, your podcast on queer issues. And so I just want to ask, what inspired you to continue doing this?
That's a really good question. I don't know exactly. And as I was listening to you read that bio, um, you know, it kind of made me wonder, like, when did I get into activism? Because really, my whole thing was making people aware of who I am and like that I exist and that people like me exist. But then I guess just by virtue of pushing for my own issues, the type of person that I am, I'm like, well, these people over here are struggling too. Or like, I think it was that I started hanging out, and I put that in air quotes because it's digital, right? But I started hanging in these circles of people that were more socially aware, that were, as loaded as the term is, social justice warriors of the day. And I kind of just fell into that camp and then started realizing, like, yeah, it's not okay to say this. And yeah, you need to grow and we need to understand these issues. And yeah, you know, this is wrong. And this is, you know, it's, if you care about inclusion, then you should look into this, and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, all the while coming up with different content creators that all have their own thing that they are very fiery and passionate about, and watching their videos and saying, oh, wow, I didn't know about this before I watched your video. So I guess that's it. It's just I grew into it because of the people that I came up around.
Yeah. And right now is there's so many ideas and a lot of people are so polarized. And I'm just curious, do you find that your activism has increased, or do you think it has decreased over time?
I would say with time, it's only increased. It's an election year, and it's very important that, you know, I use my podcast, which is growing today, to keep people informed. And, you know, it's a podcast by and for queer people of color, and that includes all people in the LGBTQ spectrum. And I just feel like it's a sense of duty. When you start getting emails or private messages or DMs on Instagram saying, thank you for this, thank you for talking about this particular thing, thanks for that episode, or I listened to this on my commute and it really fired me up for the rest of the day, or I'm going to do this because I listened to the episode. Any one of those things, you know, it keeps you going, and it makes you realize, like, not everybody is comfortable doing what it is that you like to do. And so keep on doing it.
Yeah. It's like keep on going, you know? So breaking down your username again, the first part is Blasian, right? And so you are biracial, half Black, half Asian. And I just wanted to know a little bit kind of what was it like growing up being biracial, Black and Asian?
I probably should have explained that when I was talking about the name, right? Thanks for guiding it back to there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Blasian, Black Asian. I'm half Black, half Filipino. And what it was like growing up. So my life is, if you really like it, it's not important for anybody else to look, but I look, and so I'm here to tell you what I see. It's very strange in that it is super down the middle. So a minor in the United States, you know, until you're 18, you're not an adult. So for 9 years of my life, the first 9 years, I lived with my mom. So it's a very Filipino, like Lola, that's grandmother in Tagalog, like lived in the house, you know, all of the things that that would encompass a quote Asian upbringing. And then when I turned 9, I moved in with my dad. So black side of my family.
Yeah.
Got to stay out until 10 p.m. Like just leave a note.
Really?
Let me know where you are.
I had no
Yeah,
idea.
like so, my dad. It's funny. He's a great parent, but he has his own hurdles that he has to deal with. But I just remember when I moved in with him, he would do things to try to make me learn about my blackness. So like making me watch the movie The Color Purple. It's funny because like the things that it was like clear that he consciously tried to do, I didn't really gravitate towards. But living in his house and listening to the music that he listened to, like James Brown and Patti LaBelle and all of that, that's the stuff that I really gravitated toward. And it wasn't like he was doing that on purpose. It was just his thing. Ultimately, this was in Southern California, but somewhere down the line around 13, I moved to Mississippi with him because he was tired of California. Down there, and especially back in like 1998, 99, and in the South, everything was just black and white. It was just that. There were barely any Latinx people in Mississippi yet. They started coming in more around, or at least being more visible.
And no Asians too.
And very little Asians.
Yeah.
But like at that point, I knew I was Filipino, but there was nothing that I did that was like expressively Filipino. It was just, he's that mixed boy. And so people thought maybe I was mixed with Latino or something. They just knew me that I was light-skinned and mixed. And so I say all of that to say that, like, when you ask me what it was like growing up Blasian, it's just like I was Asian at one point, and then I was black at another point. But I had a lot of groups, or I had the oldest group on Facebook for Blasians, and we talk about this kind of thing all the time. And it's always interesting to see other people talk about their upbringings and how it was such a mixed cultural home and all this stuff. That's not my experience. My experience is like binary one and then move over to the other binary. It was just so strange. Catholic Church first 9 years of my life. And then all of a sudden getting thrust into black Pentecostal, running around the church screaming, falling out type church.
Yeah.
So very polar opposite upbringing. And so it's just truly the definition of intersectionality is my existence. So I'll write a book one day.
Do it. I'll read it. I'm just curious, just how do, both sides of you, how do the Asian community respond to you being Blasian, and how does the Black community respond to you being Blasian?
It's a very, very, very complicated topic for the Black side. So I'm going to start with the Filipino side first. Filipinos, I'll tell them that I'm Filipino and they'll be like, oh, wow, yeah, I can kind of see it in your face. Yeah, because they're like happy about it. I guess they're just happy that like this cool person to them is them. I don't know how serious it needs to get. I don't know that. I do know that like Filipinos in the Philippines are like super obsessed with the idea of purity and like being quote pure Filipino. But it's definitely not a realm that I would ever find myself navigating because I'm already mixed. So like they fight amongst themselves as Filipinos being like, well, you have more Hispanic blood in you because they were colonized by the Spanish, of course. So like I've seen these arguments happen online. So I can't even touch it with a stick because I'm already half and half. So like I'm not going to fight to be Filipino. On the other side, it's like I get completely accepted into the Black community to the point where it's almost like don't ask, don't tell, which I'm not comfortable with. Because as soon as this is a conversation that comes up with Blasians a lot. As soon as we start to acknowledge our other part of our heritage, then all of a sudden we're viewed as a race traitor, or we think we're too good to just be Black. Or when we say I'm more than Black, then all of a sudden it means, oh, so we're less than. It's like, no, but why don't you understand that? Like I have this other heritage. And I think that the problem lies as I look more and more into it and read things. There's a very complicated history with biracial Black and white people, in which Black white people who are passing as white, or at least think they're passing as white, try to run from Blackness in order not to face the same oppression that Black people do. And because the worldview some Asian people as trying to align with whiteness, thanks to that awful model minority myth, which some Asians like to play into. There's a kind of vitriol there as well. And I understand why people would look at some people and say, oh, you're saying you're mixed, or you're really leaning into your mixed heritage because you don't like being Black. And that's not the case. So
what
it's a lot.
So for our listeners, what is the model minority myth? If somebody's not familiar.
Oh, okay. Well, the model minority myth, I like to say it's just a very good divide and conquer tactic among the majority white supremacist racist system that is the United States of America. That's not to say everybody's racist. I'm just talking about institutionalized racism and how, it's the way it's set up, the way it works. So the way you keep control over a people is to divide and conquer. And if you can make one group of folks believe, oh, well, why can't you be like them because they're so good?
Yeah.
You're the bad type. Talking to the Black people of the Asian folks. Oh, they're so rich. Yeah. Oh, they get along well. They are obedient. It's like, it's a myth because, in late 1800s, y'all were excluding Chinese people and like dragging them through the streets and lynching them. Like, you had the same amount of hate for Asians at one point that you do for everybody else that's not white.
Yeah.
So and I mean, look it up, the Chinese Exclusion Act and the LA Chinese Massacre. It's a Wikipedia article. You can look it up yourself. But at the same time, then you want to lift up Asians and be like, oh, they're so good. They're so obedient. Like, why, looking at the Black people, why can't you be like them?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it does damage both ways, right? It gives some people who play into it this false sense of superiority to other minorities. And then also it erases the fact that the Asian community, which first of all is already a broad term, but the Asian community has a plethora of different types of people: rich, poor, smart, dumb. It's not just one monolith as well that they try to paint it out to make others look worse.
Yeah. It's somehow by being different or improving yourself, you're going to eradicate racism, right? The blame is almost put on you that you brought this upon yourself, when in fact, the racism exists because it's outside of you. It's the non-minorities that are causing the racism. Question: when did you realize you were different from everyone else when you identify as being queer?
Oh, in regards to queerness.
Yeah.
It's weird. I've thought about this. Hindsight is 2020. So there were like breadcrumbs, like an M. Night Shyamalan movie leading up to the point of struggle. Like there were definitely things that I did that were super gay or super queer of me, but I was just being me. And this is like when I was 5 years old. There was like, that's act one. That's like the prologue. But then there was a time of middle school and like hormones getting involved and me being like, well, this isn't right. Like, why do I get hot like in the locker room looking at these guys as we're all changing? Or like, why do I get bothered when this guy on TV takes off his shirt? Or why do I feel like everybody's going to look at me when there's a gay thing happening on TV? So like super closeted and like super in denial about it for years until like college, to the point where in college I was arguing against gay people about why being gay was wrong. And yeah, it's like over the summer of, I think, my sophomore year, my school, we had like a online newspaper, and something about homosexuality, and then like the most flamboyant known gay person on campus made a comment, and then I commented back, and it was this long diatribe about like why it's wrong and why God says it's wrong and all this stuff. And then the school took it and posted it in the newspaper, like took my comment without asking, but like
wait, as in like supporting the conservatives?
Yes. And that news, like that newspaper circulated all around Mississippi. It was in like the registrar's office of HBCUs. I went to his historically black college, by the way. So like when I came out the following year, all the gays on campus were like, well, this is not a surprise, but also is a surprise. They were like, it's not a surprise because we knew you were gay, but it is surprising that you would come out because you last year wrote that horrible thing. And I don't know where that thing is now. But and so that's the end of Act 2, and then Act 3 is just trying to live life and the present. But going back to Act 1, those breadcrumbs, I was a little kid watching Sleeping Beauty, and like, I don't, what was the name of that candy that like it was like a glue stick, but it was candy, and you could twist it and it would come out like a lipstick. I would put that sugar candy. I would sit on the couch and cross my legs and like put it on like
really.
The fact that when my mom would come out of her room into the living room, I would immediately stop doing that. I knew that it was quote wrong. Like I didn't want to get caught doing that.
Yeah.
So it's really weird. I was 5 years old at that time, like 4 or 5. I remember that. And then there were like, there were other things that like happened that it's just really weird, and I don't know how like explicit we can get on this podcast, but I just remember like doing these sleepovers with friends because it was a military family. So like because my mom really liked black guys, I guess. So my parents divorced, but then my stepdad was a black guy as well, who was also in the military in San Diego. So we would have these like, they had military friends and their friends had kids, and I would be sleep over at a lot of people's houses, and the boys, like 2 boys off of the top of my head, I can remember them. And I wonder what they're doing to this day. But like I remember, it's so funny. And like, we're both like 6 years old. So it wasn't anything like, we're both very young, but I was lying in bed and like the boy grabbed my butt. And I was like, with both of his hand and squeezed as hard as he could. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then he's like, no, it's okay. Do it to me. And so like, I grabbed his butt and squeezed it. And it's just really weird. And then another boy, I slept over, and we were like 6 or 7 years old. And like he slept at the head of his bed and I slept at the foot of his bed. So like his head was at where it would normally be. And then my head was where his feet would be. But then he would like put his feet in between my legs and like touch my junk with his feet. And then I would do the same to him. And I'm like, were we just being boys, or was that some gay shit that we were doing back then? So
what? You don't know what they're doing? You don't know where they are?
I have no idea. I know both of their names, but I have no way of knowing where they are today.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Well, what's your current status? Are you single, partnered, looking, not looking?
Well, I'm single, and I don't know. I think I am super jaded. I'm not like Whitney Houston. I don't believe in miracles, and love is not a miracle to me because I've been single way too long. I've only had 2 relationships in my life, and
that's okay.
And they were not even really relationships. They were both situationships, because one completely cheated on me the entire time. And then the other one never gave me the title of it, despite the fact that we did like couple stuff. And that lasted from like 2008 to 2014. So that's what it is.
Yeah. And then kind of this episode is really just to talk about love and how we navigate love as queer Asian people. And I just wanted to kind of ask you, what has your experience been like navigating love as a biracial, gay, black, Asian man?
Yeah, you got all of it. Well, it's interesting because, when the world looks at me, they don't see an Asian man. Mm-hmm. They see a black man. For instance, I take the 2 guys that I talked about. They were both black, the 2 situationships. Of course, I hook up with people, and mainly Latinx people are attracted to me. I mean, these are just the stats. I'm not saying every Latinx. I'm just saying that in my experience, I've hooked up with a lot of Latinx guys, and then black people are naturally attracted to me. But Filipino guys are sometimes attracted to me. But I don't want to do it. But I mean, if you follow me on any social media, you'll see I do drag the Asian community because y'all act like you don't like brown and black people.
Yeah.
And
No, it's
for
a
me to be
big thing.
for
Yeah.
me to be half of what y'all are, it's very difficult to look at a part of me and then not see the same level of interaction in the opposite direction. In preparing for this podcast, I tried to think of any of the like super gays on Instagram, especially Gaysians that are followed by a lot of people and like have a black boyfriend. I can only think of one. Shout out to you, Asian Maple Leaf in Canada and New York, because he's the only one with a black boyfriend. And they show each other off proudly. Everybody else is white folks. Or, I mean, nobody ever shits on people for dating their own. So I'm not going to be mad that Asian people that are Asian presenting only date Asian people that are Asian presenting. In my observation, and it's not my original, like I'm not the one who originated this. I've actually had to do research myself. When Asians date outside of their race, then it's not with brown and black people. I'll say that much. So that really tempers the lens through which I look at dating in the Asian community as being part Asian.
Yeah, and why do you think that is? Why do you think Asian people...
anti-blackness. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, anti-blackness, thinking that black is not beautiful or thinking brown is not beautiful.
Colorism.
It's prevalent in not only dating, quote, preferences, but also in, the fact that we carry, or my own Lola goes outside and she doesn't want to get brown, so she carries a parasol around. India has, and a lot of Asia are like home to a multi-billion-dollar skin whitening industry. Fair and Lovely is a thing. Different lotions with bleaching agents are a thing. People want to be as light and white as possible. And when we talk about white supremacy and we say those words, we often think about American racism and we think about the Ku Klux Klan and we think about white people ruling. But what another component that falls under that, quote, white supremacy is thinking that whiteness is supreme. Even if we're not talking about white American people or European people, we're talking about white skin or lightness or, white features. So I don't possess those things. And so I'm not conventionally hot to specifically that group, because I'm still hot as hell to a lot of people. And I don't take them for granted at all. But it's very, very disheartening to see that this is the case with this particular community.
Yeah. And some people will say, you try to address some of these things and they'll say, well, it's just my preference, right? They'll say, well, whoever I love, I just love because it's just a preference, whether it's based on their body type or their ethnicity or skin color. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, and I'm just regurgitating a lot of the things that have been discussed with a whole bunch of friends over coffee or somewhere on the internet, but those preferences, or as I call them, preference gays, all of that is just rooted in the fact that one type of person and one type of presentation to be superior over others. So for instance, if you're going to say, oh yeah, I can like a black guy. Well, then let's look at the black guys that you do like. Are they all light skinned? Do they all have six packs? Do they have angular faces that have Eurocentric features? Because, a lot of black guys have whiteness mixed in their bloodline due to the circumstances of their existence in the United States in the past. So talking about slavery, y'all. So, it's just a thing. Like, that's what I think forms those preferences. And feel convicted as you may, I do a lot of thinking and a lot of talking about this type of thing.
Yeah. And I think it's really fascinating because sometimes you have the people who claim to be super woke, right? And when you do try to talk about these things or address their dating history, right? So not just looking at the recent person they've dated, but collectively who they've been dating and seeing what trends show up in their dating history, it is very obvious what they're attracted to and what they're into, right? And I think it's something worth exploring too, because when we say, I like, oranges, or I like apples, for example, I think we also have as much influence over what we like, right? And it's not all based on genetics. It's not all just based on these preconceived preferences that we're just born with. It could also be due to generational issues, like you had mentioned. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts about dating apps?
Dating apps are cool. I know people who have met I know guys that have met their husbands on dating apps. They're good for they're a way to find what you're looking for. If you're looking for a hookup, you might find it. They are breeding. I mean, it's the internet, so you're still gonna find trashy people, and you're gonna see the preference gays, and it's unfortunate. You're gonna learn things about yourself, especially if you're a person of color, if you mind to think about it.
Yeah.
So
what did you learn?
Well, I mean, being a brown person, and being like in my day job, I am an analyst. So this is my brain. Like, this is how I got in this field, by noticing trends and patterns and taking notes. And so with the dating apps, just like in my real life, if I see a trend, then I take note of it. And I take note of who doesn't respond, because I'm equal opportunist. Don't get it. Make no mistake about it. And if I think that someone's hot, then I'm going to reach out to them if I feel like it. And I know I take note of who doesn't respond. And I take note of who does respond. And I take note of who hits me up first. The Cliff's Notes version of it is that if I find a white person attractive, and I hit them up, most of the time they will not hit me back up. If I find an Asian person that I find attractive, same thing as white, they will not hit me back up. It's very much a stay in your quote own lane. So because I'm Black presenting, if I do hit up a Black person, then they will definitely hit me back up, and mainly Black and Latinx people hit me up first.
Do they just not respond, or do they say something to you that you're like, oh, that's interesting?
No, just no response.
Interesting. Do they have like read status? I haven't used dating apps in a while. Do they have like read?
Grindr, if we're going to mention one in particular, Grindr does have a read status, but that's for if you pay for it, and I'm not about to pay for a Grindr. I'm just not going to do it. There's an uglier side to it. If white people do hit me up, then it's usually to objectify me. Or if Asian people do hit me up, then it's to objectify me and ask what my penis size is, if I'm hung or not. And that's literally the first question that comes across. And I just don't respond to that because, again, that's not what I might be looking for a hookup, but I'm not looking to be your object. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that logic. People might say, well, you are on there for sex, so why do you think they wouldn't be asking that? But I go back to this one experience that I had with a guy that I was in the middle of having sex with, and like he was riding me, and I was like, I put my hands on his hips, and he was like, don't objectify me that way. And I was like, you know what? He's right.
Yeah.
Like, if he doesn't want to be used as an object in that way, then I'm not going to do that. So for all of you all out there that are like, but it's Grindr, of course they're going to ask you if you're hung. I can draw the line where I want to draw the line.
Yeah.
This is an NC-17 rated podcast now.
Yeah. Well,
we done talked about the sex.
We did, and the penises. But let me ask you, so that racial objectification, this racial fetishism, does it perpetuate past Grindr, and does it appear in your real life as well?
I'm sure that I don't think it's ever happened in real life. I don't really go to bars a lot. I used to in New York, but I'm not in the situation. But I'm sure it can happen. It's quite interesting when we talk about racial objectification and we think about the fact that I am half Asian, and the reason I'm on here is to talk about navigating this as a queer Asian. That none of the queer Asian stereotypes apply to me because, again, I am Black presenting. So nobody thinks I'm going to be submissive. Nobody thinks that I'm a small twink. Um, you know, I don't. None of the Asian stereotypes fit me, and so it's not that I want them to, but it's just very interesting that how identity and stereotypes, they're like oil and water, at least for me, being someone that already goes against the grain of what the expectation is.
Yeah. And why do you think people have these stereotypes, these racial stereotypes?
To feed, to one, turn people into objects that become fetishes and fulfill those desires. I believe it was on your podcast you broke down the etymology of the word fetish, and it goes back to sexual object.
Yes.
So
it's fascinating.
If you are the type of person who desires a toy, a small toy for your sexual desires, then you're going to view people, and in this case Asians, as your toy. I think there's a term for it, like China doll, right? I don't know if that's bad to say, but like that's the way people think. And on the inverse, or on the opposite end of that, you want someone with a big dick. You're going to automatically think Black guys, when like that's not the case with every single Black guy. But you got people talking about BBC and the fact that, like, it's so dumb to me, but like I remember we're in the middle of this argument with this one gay who's not a person of color, and I think someone either implied or accused them of not liking Black people, and they're like, "Girl, I do like Black people. I love me some BBC." And it's like, is that where, like, that's your reaction? That's your defense? So
by having a racist stereotype, I am not a racist.
Right. That's worse than being like, I have Black friends, so I can't be racist. That's the next level of fuckery. Like, what?
Has that happened to you, where someone's like, I have Black friends, of course I'm not a racist, look, I'm friends with Johnathan. How do you respond to that?
Sometimes I just dismiss it, or sometimes I'm like, that does not make you racist. So, or that does not make you not racist. And then if I feel like doing the work and the labor, then I can be like, because you are playing into this institutionalized whatever, like, it's a whole other subject.
Yeah. Well, how do we demolish this institutionalized racism?
Gotta do the work. Because I think the easier question for the scope of this podcast is, because you mentioned it earlier, when you were talking about preferences, and I wanted to say that, like, you just have to literally do work to not undo those preferences, but do work to widen your preferences. It's the work presents itself in different ways. It's like, I have my own built-in just trash ways of thinking. I am not immune to any of the things that I have mentioned today. It's very interesting because sometimes doing the work, someone has told me, like, I'm not going to be a martyr for the cause. And, I have a friend, he's a PhD student. He, somewhere in the Northeast at a very reputable Ivy League university, a Black person. And his stance right now is, I will just not date white people. And I'm like, wow, that is interesting. And he can find white people attractive, but he is not going to contribute to the statistics of people at the PhD level that are people of color being with white people, because it is such a thing. Whenever either PhD level, which is basically almost like celebrity status of academia, or actual celebrities. When people of color celebrities reach a certain level, then you kind of notice a pattern, again, going back to that analyst brain, but I'm not the only one who's seen it, where people of color get to a certain height and then they're only dating white people. And there are a lot of conversations that have been had about it, or well, maybe it's because there are less people of color at that level in the industry. And well, whatever the case may be, this particular friend has clocked it, has taken note of it, and said, I am actively not going to date white people for this specific cause. And to the untrained listener, they might be like, well, why is he being so racist? That's not being racist. That's undoing the racist system of, and when we say racist, again, don't think of pitchforks and clan hoods. Just think of the fact that there is a group that is in power and gets what it wants when it wants it. And that's, and then leveraging that against minorities.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious, has your work, all doing this activism, this work in media, has it ever intersected with your dating life?
One time, and I met this guy, and I'm such a weird person. So I met this person, and to this day, I don't know if I think it was just a friendly meeting, and I'm sure that he would say it was just a friendly meeting as well. But we met at a bar and had drinks, so that counts as a first date. And he told me we were talking about we're trying to get to know each other, and he was like, well, I like to do this, this, and this. I think it's running and listen to podcasts. I just started listening to podcasts. That was him. And then of course, being a podcaster, I was like, oh, what podcast do you listen to then? And he was like, hold on, I'll open my phone. So he opens his phone, and it's I think he's also an analyst. So it was this one analytical podcast, one of his industry. And then another one was RuPaul's podcast or whatever, or someone. And then one of them was my podcast, this QPOC Life. And so amazing. I just sat there and I was like, oh, okay, well, let's go back a little. Who told you to listen to this QPOC Life?
Yeah.
And then he was like, oh, my therapist told me. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm on that podcast. I'm Johnathan.
Oh, he didn't know.
He was like, what? He was like, oh my God, I knew your voice sounded familiar. It was just, so that's the only time that dating and my work, quote unquote, have intersected.
He didn't know.
He didn't know. I would think it would be I don't know, with you maybe it would be different, because I've told you your podcast, you have this very mindful and very slow cadence. I'm sure that if I were meeting someone off of somewhere and then they had your voice, I'd be like, are you the guy from Yellow Glitter?
No, you know what's funny? I'm at work and everyone's like, you should have a podcast. Your voice is so soothing. I'm like, oh yeah, I should definitely, yeah. People are so funny, but that is interesting. Or did he know that was your podcast and he was trying to...
He didn't know. He didn't know.
He was trying not to get clocked. He was like,
I'm not big enough for people to try to hook me in or be let me reach out to him. It's funny though. I've seen content creators on the apps though. I'd be walking around the city or something and I'll see this makeup artist I knew. And I'm like, oh my God, that's such and such. Oh my gosh. And then I'll hit them up and they'll hit me back up because they're people of color makeup artists on YouTube. And we'll just kiki and talk or whatever. I'm not interested in hooking up like that. Because it's just I'm coming across as a fan in the app already. So so
it's interesting. Yeah, it's a small world though. It's the people we run across in the internet space too. You never know when you will run into them in person. I feel like it's happened to me so many times, surprisingly.
Me too. I was walking, I was super obsessed with BuzzFeed's morning show, and it had two hosts on it, and I would tweet at them. I watched them every morning for their first 2 years, and
mega fan.
So they knew who I was. They even had me on the show in this same exact format as a follower appreciation. And then just one day I was in downtown Brooklyn crossing the street, and one of the hosts was crossing the street and he saw me first and he stopped me, and I was like, what?
No way.
And he was like, wow, it's you.
That's
And I was
amazing.
like, no, it's you.
Oh, he had good memory. Good for him.
Yeah, he meant that he was really into his work. He's no longer the host. They graduated both of the hosts, and they got 2 new hosts. But that was one of the many occasions that it's just funny. It's really funny. Being a person on the internet, quote unquote, when you're a content creator with a modest following. I accidentally sent a DM to one of my Instagram followers one time, and then like he was like, "This is not who you think it is." And I'm, we're all just regular people. So I was like, "LOL, sorry." And then I was like, "So how are you doing today?" Like being awkward. Like I'm not going to just stop talking to you all of a sudden. But this is someone I don't follow. Someone I don't follow. They follow me, and like I have a modest following. And then they send me back there like, "To be honest, I'm super shook right now that you're even talking to me." And I'm like, "What?
What?
It's not even like that. Like, whatever."
Block. Just kidding.
No.
Oh,
he was happy to be in my DM presence,
sweet.
I guess. I don't know.
That's really sweet. Oh. Yeah, I have a quick question. If you were to turn back time, if you were to go way back in time and give advice to 6-year-old Johnathan on love, what would it be?
Oh, that's a hard question. What would it be? I think it would be, I don't know though, because if we went back to 6-year-old Johnathan, we'd be going to like 1989. And so the type of advice that I would give as grown Johnathan to 6-year-old Johnathan, I would say like, be who you are, love who you are, and don't hide it. But like, I remember being in the 7th grade in like 1996, like it still wasn't safe for a gay kid. Like, so that's that, I might be looking too hard into the question by including the timeline. But if I had to go back to 1989 and tell little young Johnathan, my current self is like, it wouldn't be the wisest thing to like encourage this kid to just like be, because today I advise people to, and people are against this sometimes, but I'm like, no, do what you have to do in order to stay in your parents' house, if that is the only source of protection that you have until you can secure an income. It's their rules. Because you see kids being kicked out and homeless
when they come out, right? Yeah.
When they come out.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be my advice. It's like, know who you are and don't write that stupid newsletter. Like, don't
write that. Don't publish that newsletter.
Like, don't be at war with yourself. Accept who you are and come out on your own time. Right. I think that's a good medium, a happy medium there.
Are there any books or resources that have helped you to navigate love?
To circle it back to the main point, which is being queer, Asian, and me being biracial in particular, and bringing back up the fact that, like, there's a note of anti-Blackness there and stuff. The books that have helped me understand, oh gosh, I can't think off the top of my head, and they're in the other room. But one of them is Brown Skin, White Minds by E.J.R. David. And then another book, which I am looking for right now. I don't post that often, so I can't. Oh, there it is. And then the other one is Brown Boys and Rice Queens, Spellbinding Performance in the Asias.
What? Okay, what
and
are
then I
they
have to look
both
up the
about?
author.
Yeah, what are they both about? Oh, I've never
Both
heard
of them are
these.
about white supremacy and the relationship between Asians and white people. And so that helps me understand the the dynamic that keeps me and people who look like me on the outside. And unfortunately so for me, because I am part of that community.
Yeah. That is fascinating. Is Brown Skin, White Minds, I know it's written with by a Filipino author, was it?
Yeah, and it's more about colonization, and it's more about the history of the Philippines. But it still informs many different attributes of quote unquote preference gays. and especially those in the Philippines that chase after white people, and helps inform me of why the world is the way it is.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. I have some rapid fire questions to wrap up. You ready?
Okay. Lightning round.
Let's
First
go.
thing that comes to mind.
Yes. What do we need more of in love?
Oh gosh. I can't just say that off the top of my head. What do we need more of in love?
Yes.
Openness.
Openness. Good. What do we need less of in love?
Preferences.
Yes. And what is inspiring you lately?
Korean cinema.
Parasite.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much for coming on. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners?
Take what you've heard today and use it to arm yourself to go out in the world and be a better person. That's super cliche, but if you made it this far, then you haven't turned it off because you got pissed off that I dragged you, because you have a large Asian fan base. So
yes,
there you go.
Mostly Asian. Yeah.
Truth hurts.
Oh. But I think it's difficult, but this work that we do, inquiring within ourselves, it's worth it. We come out the other end with so many insights that we can really use to not only change ourselves, but change the world,
Yes.
Yeah. And how can our listeners find or reach out to you?
I am Johnathan, aka blasianFMA. That's BLASIAN, F as in Frank, M as in Mary, A as in Alpha. On all platforms, Twitter, I prefer Instagram. And I am also promoting the fact that I am producing an independent film. And I want you to keep an eye out for it, specifically because it is about a young Asian American performer entering the entertainment industry and how he deals with his own inner white supremacy.
Wow, that's amazing. And some of the shots I saw on your social media look amazing. I'm so excited for that.
We're really trying to make it look nice. And we're going to submit it to film festivals and things like that. Because we need representation, queer Asian representation in the media. And so this is my contribution to that, while adding my, twist and spin and spice and flavor that is me into this.
Yes. Can't wait for that. And yeah, thank you so much, Johnathan. It was such an amazing time with you. Thank you for coming on. And
thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. And that's it for this episode of Yellow Glitter on Love. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me via my Instagram at Stephen Wakabayashi. And if you enjoyed this, please leave a rating or review. It takes a few seconds. And if you have a few minutes, leave me a comment. It helps other people find this podcast as well. And with that, so much love for you, and hope your day can be a little bit more mindful. Bye.
Bye.